I always found something oddly mesmerizing about airport windows. The sheer size of the glass panels, the way they stretched from floor to ceiling, offering a perfect view of the runways. I used to wonder how they were even transported and installed. But today, the only thing moving outside was snow, thick wet flakes drifting down in lazy spirals. It had started about 2 hours ago, just before I was supposed to take off on a 3-day business trip. The intercom crackled to life with yet another announcement. Ladies and gentlemen, due to severe weather conditions, all flights remain delayed. Updates will be provided as soon as possible. Great. Another 2 hours, at least. The snow wasn't deep enough for plows yet, but it was coming down too hard for planes to take off. The Denver Regional Airport wasn't exactly an international hub, but it handled plenty of connecting flights. Right now, though, it was just a place for stranded travelers to drink overpriced coffee and stare at their phones. I pulled mine out and called my wife, Lauren. No answer. Tried again. Still nothing. I figured she was outside shoveling the driveway. She always insisted on getting out there early, saying it was easier to clear light snow multiple times than to deal with a thick layer later. Normally, I was the one handling that chore, so part of me was secretly pleased she'd have to do it this time. Lauren and I had been married for 15 years. No kids. Just a dog and a comfortable suburban life. She rarely traveled with me, preferring to stay home when my trips were dull, which they almost always were. But the best part of business travel? The welcome home Zex. Distance, as they say, makes the heart grow fonder. I slipped my phone back into my jacket and stretched my legs, deciding to wander over toward the VIP lounge. That's when I spotted a guy I vaguely recognized. Vince, I think? We'd shared small talk on previous flights, though nothing memorable. He was sitting with 3 other guys at a round table, an assortment of half-finished drinks in front of them. As soon as he noticed me, he waved. Hey David. Come join the Cheating Hearts Club. I smirked. I assume that's not a Hank Williams fan club? The biggest guy at the table chuckled and stuck out a hand. Name's Rob. And no, this is just a little support group for men who have been, let's say, romantically inconvenienced by their wives. The rest of the table groaned in agreement, lifting their drinks like they were making a toast to the collective misery of married men. The youngest guy, Troy, early 30s, boyish face, already 3 drinks in, waved the waitress over for another round. I shook my head. Sorry, fellas, but I can't join. I'm happily married. That got a laugh. The oldest guy, Jake, grizzled, mid-50s, the kind of man who looked like he'd seen some serious shit, shook his head with a smirk. Denial. First stage of grief, buddy. I rolled my eyes but took a seat. No harm in killing time with some drunk cynics. The conversation was light at first, bullshitting about flights, sports, work, but eventually, Troy turned to me with a smirk. So David, what's Lauren up to while you're stuck here? And what's your secret for keeping her happy? I shrugged. Probably shoveling snow. She's not answering her phone, so I assume she's outside. That earned a unanimous groan from the table. What? I asked, genuinely confused. Jake leaned forward, his tone slow, deliberate. Let me get this straight. You left town, your wife knows you're gone, and now suddenly, she's not answering her phone. Does that ever happen? I opened my mouth to respond, then stopped. No. That never happened. Well, that's why I assume she's shoveling, I muttered, but I could already feel the doubt creeping in. Troy chuckled darkly. Right. Because women love shoveling snow in the middle of a storm when their husband usually does it. I pulled out my phone and dialed again, first the house phone, then Lauren's cell. No answer. For pairs of smug, cynical eyes stared at me over the rims of their drinks. Hell with it, I sighed. I need a whiskey. The whiskey burned on the way down, but I barely noticed. My mind was elsewhere, bouncing between the faces at the table and the unanswered calls on my phone. I tried to shake it off. It's nothing. Maybe she was just taking a long shower, or the dog knocked over something, and she was cleaning it up. Hell, maybe she didn't hear the phone. But the problem with doubt? Once it settles in, it doesn't leave. All right, I said, setting my glass down. Since you guys are clearly self-proclaimed experts in betrayal, how'd you all find out your wives were cheating? Rob, the big guy, smirked and leaned back. You really want to go down that road? I nodded. What else was I gonna do while waiting for my damn flight? Rob took a sip of his beer and started his story. I was getting ready for work one morning when I overheard my wife talking on the phone. Didn't think much of it, until I heard two words, hot tub and wine. That didn't sit right. She wasn't the type to drink wine, and we sure as hell didn't have a hot tub. I had already literally left the house, but when I heard this, I waited until she finished the conversation, and as soon as she left the room, leaving her phone behind, I took advantage of it, quickly returned and checked her phone. She had 8 speed dial contacts, all family and friends, except the last one. It was labeled as a nail salon. Seemed off, so I wrote the number down and had my secretary look it up. Turns out it belonged to Brian Curtis, a local real estate agent. And guess what? He just so happened to have a reservation that day at the only hotel in town with private hot tubs. So I called my wife and asked if she wanted to grab lunch. She said she had plans with her friend Janet. Yeah, sure. I drove straight to the hotel, parked a few spaces down, and waited. 10 minutes later, her car pulls in. She saw me as she parked, and the look on her face was fucking priceless. She knew she was caught. She tried to spin some bullshit story about how Janet was meeting her there. I didn't even respond. I just smiled, took out my phone, and called the nail salon number. Brian answered. I said, "Hey man, Joan's gonna be a little late today. Oh, and by the way, they're towing your car." Right on cue, Brian burst out of the hotel room, looking around like a dumbass. As he rushed past me, I stuck my leg out. He went down like a sack of bricks. Then, for good measure, I kicked him square in the balls. Drove straight to my lawyer's office. 6 months later, I was a free man. And so was Brian, because his wife divorced him too. Then Jake lit a cigar, exhaling a thick cloud of smoke before starting his story. 23 years of marriage. Kids grew up, moved out, and I started taking more business trips. One time, I had to spend 3 months in Peru. Right before my flight back, I got bitten by some nasty spider, so when I landed, I had to pick up antibiotics from the pharmacy. Our pharmacist was an old friend, knew everyone in the neighborhood. While handing me my prescription, he asked, "Want to grab Brenda's too?" "It's ready." Brenda, my wife. I frowned. "What prescription?" He showed me the bottle. Birth control pills. Now, that was interesting. We weren't having kids. I had a vasectomy 10 years ago. So unless she suddenly developed a hormone deficiency, there was only one reason she'd need those. That night, I pulled up our phone records. 20 minutes after my plane took off 3 months ago, she called someone. I ran the number. Gary Nolan. A local landscaper. Married, 3 kids. But over the last 3 months, Brenda had called him 28 times. Next morning, I went to his house. Gary wasn't home, but his wife was. She already knew. She said she hated it, but they were broke, and Brenda was paying Gary $50 for every visit. $50. My wife was getting dicked down at a discount. I told his wife I'd be back the next day. And you know what? By the time I returned, they were gone. Cowards ran. I didn't even have time to knock out his teeth. But I got my revenge another way. 2 days later, I served Brenda divorce papers. You know what the best part was? She thought I had no idea. And when I threw the papers in her face, I saw a once-in-a-lifetime expression of pure, unfiltered panic. Jake chuckled hoarsely and took another drag from his cigar. Vince smirked as he took a sip of his Coke. As for my wife, a goddamn professional liar. Almost impressive. I was a trucker. 1 week on the road, 3 days at home. But then she started acting too nice. Back rubs, fancy dinners, even agreed to go to a baseball game, and she hated baseball. That's when I knew I was being played. So, I set up a fake work trip. Drove out of town. Waited an hour. Then I came back with an ice-cold Coke, a baseball bat, and a Sudoku book. Sure enough, An hour later, she left the house. I followed. She met up with her friend in a parking lot downtown. They drove 20 minutes to a cheap motel. I parked and took the elevator to the 3rd floor. I sat down right next to the elevator door, pulled out my Sudoku, and I waited. 2 hell hours later, they walked out. The second she saw me sitting there, she froze. And her friend? He was our neighbor. Married. 2 kids. Mark Stafford. She grabbed his arm and yanked him back into the room. Over the next 15 minutes, he peeked out the door 3 times. Finally, he decided to talk it out. He stepped into the hallway. I stood up, baseball bat in hand. He stepped right the fuck back inside. 30 minutes later, hotel security showed up. Asked me to leave. I refused. Police arrived. I told them I feared for my wife's safety, that she was being held against her will by a dangerous man. Total bullshit. But they checked anyway. 10 minutes later, the cops walked out. One of them cleared his throat and said real quiet, "Sir, your wife is too afraid to come out, because of what she did." I laughed in his face. Then I walked straight into my lawyer's office. She got the house. I got my freedom. And her boyfriend? His wife filed for divorce even faster than I did. Vince took a slow sip of his drink. And that, boys, is how you set up a checkmate. Rob finished his beer and grinned. So David, wanna try calling Lauren again? I did. Still no answer. A long, knowing groan echoed around the table. Jake, the oldest in the group, leaned forward. Got a neighbor you can call? That was actually a good idea. I flipped through my contacts and called Ed, the old guy who lived across the street. He was retired, spent most of his time watching the neighborhood. If anyone knew what was going on, it'd be him. Ed answered on the 3rd ring. David. What's up? Hey, Ed. Just checking in. Have you seen Lauren? She's not picking up. There was a pause. Haven't seen her since she left about 2 hours ago. Right when the snow started. Something tightened in my chest. The driveway, I said, my voice a little hollow. Is it shoveled? Nope. Not a damn flake. I swallowed hard. That meant she hadn't been outside. And if she hadn't been outside, then where the hell was she? I hung up, feeling the weight of 4 smug stares drilling into me. Troy smirked. So, David, you still think she's just busy? I didn't answer. Instead, I stared at my phone, debating my next move. Jake leaned in, voice low and calm. You got anyone in mind? And just like that, Nick Coates popped into my head. Lauren had mentioned him a lot when he first moved back to town about 6 months ago. A little too much. At first, it was casual. Oh, Nick and I had some classes together in college. We used to hang out a lot. But as time went on, she stopped bringing him up entirely. That's what stuck with me. Because people don't just stop talking about someone. They stop talking about them when they don't want you asking questions. And now, sitting in a bar full of guys who'd all had their marriages destroyed by shit like this, I was starting to see the pattern. I clenched my jaw and exhaled slowly. Yeah, I admitted. I got someone in mind. Troy grinned. Then let's go. I blinked. Go where? Your house, Rob said. Or his. I hesitated. Flights might be back on in an hour. Jake smirked. You really think you're in the right headspace to go on a business trip? Shit. I ran a hand down my face, thinking it through. If she's cheating, she'll come up with some excuse. If I don't do something now, I'll let her bullshit me into believing it's nothing. I looked around the table. For guys, all of whom had been here before. They knew the drill. And they were all more than willing to tag along. I sighed. Okay. Then let's go to the car. Walter, the quiet one up until now, spoke up. What do you drive? Ford Explorer. 4-wheel drive. He nodded. Good enough. How far is it? About an hour, even in this weather. Vince grinned. Then let's take a little road trip. The 5 of us left the airport like a pack of wolves on a hunt. The air was thick with that bitter camaraderie that only men who've been burned can share. I tossed my keys to Walter, who volunteered to drive. He seemed like the most level-headed one of the group, and I needed a minute to collect my thoughts. The Explorer's tires crunched through the fresh snow as we pulled onto the highway. The roads were slick, barely plowed, and visibility was shit. Not that it mattered. If Lauren was cheating, I was going to find out tonight. Jake leaned back in the passenger seat, looking at me in the rearview mirror. You ready for this? I exhaled slowly. Guess we'll find out. Just don't do anything stupid, Walter said, eyes on the road. This is about winning, not ending up in jail. I nodded, though my hands clenched into fists on my lap. Troy, the youngest of the group, turned around from the front seat. All right, Harry. You never finished your story. How'd you catch your wife? Harry, sitting next to me, chuckled darkly. All right. Might as well kill time. He stretched his legs out and started talking. My ex-wife Kelly and I used to belong to the Civic Club, basically just an excuse for suburban couples to drink, dance, and bullshit about local politics. Every weekend, the guys would end up in the basement playing poker, while the women did whatever women do when their husbands aren't paying attention. Everything was fine until one night, Mark Stafford walked in. Now, Mark was Kelly's high school sweetheart. The guy she almost married before she settled for me. He'd been out of town for decades, but suddenly here he was, bragging about his success in advertising and acting like he still owned the damn place. After asking around a bit, it turned out that he was staying at one of the nicer hotels in town, Madison Inn. I kept an eye on them all night. She was trying to play it cool, but every time they talked, she'd glance over at me, like she was checking to see if I noticed. And I noticed. I saw something interesting. She held up her hand and flashed 5 fingers, then 4 fingers. He nodded. A little signal. A countdown. She knew that I would usually be playing cards at that time, and I would definitely be busy for about 2 hours, and that was a sign for him. So I went up to her, told her I was going to play, she nodded, and I stepped away and went to the back door unnoticed. I waited a few minutes, then left out the back door, grabbed my car, and drove straight to the Madison Inn. Sure enough, 10 minutes later, his white Lexus pulls up. I already knew which room he was staying in, so I took the elevator to the 3rd floor and waited. When the doors opened, there she was. My wife. My fucking wife. Mark's grin disappeared real quick when he saw me. I looked at him and said, I'm heading home early. When you're done with her, drop her off at the house. And then I broke his goddamn nose. Kelly was forced to take a taxi home. I filed for divorce the next morning. Best decision I ever made. The SUV was silent for a moment. Then Troy let out a low whistle. Damn, man. Harry grinned. It was satisfying. Broke my damn hand in the process, though. I smirked. Worth it. Oh, absolutely. Walter took the last turn onto my street, the headlights cutting through the swirling snow. All right, which one's yours? Jake asked. Not mine, I muttered. His. We all turned to look at the small brick house at the end of the street. Nick's house. And parked in his driveway? Lauren's blue Ford Focus. The whole car went silent. Well, Troy muttered. Shit. I just stared at the car. No more doubts. No more, maybe I'm overthinking it. My wife was inside. With him. I cracked my knuckles. All right. Here's what we're gonna do. The blue Ford Focus sat there like a goddamn monument to my stupidity. Snow was already starting to pile up on the windshield, which meant it had been there for a while. Long enough. I clenched my jaw, my breath slow and steady. No more denial. No more excuses. Jake exhaled through his nose. All right, David. What's the move? 1,000 different scenarios ran through my mind. Kicking in the door, dragging Nick out into the snow, making sure he never smiled with all his teeth again. But as much as I wanted that, Walter's words echoed in my head. This is about winning. Not ending up in jail. I exhaled. I'm not gonna start a fight. Troy raised an eyebrow. Well, that's disappointing. I smirked. Doesn't mean I won't end it. I pulled out my phone and started typing. Jake leaned over. What are you doing? Texting Lauren. Me, hi, I'll be back early. The flight was rescheduled. I'll be home in 15 minutes. I can't wait to see you. I hit send and watched the message deliver. No dots, no immediate response. 5 long, heavy seconds passed. Then, Lauren, oh my God, really? That's amazing, baby. I can't wait to see you. I let out a small chuckle. Oh, you can't wait, huh? Me, yeah, heading to baggage claim now. Just hopping in a car. Another pause. Then, Lauren, perfect. I'll have everything ready for you. Jake let out a low whistle. Damn. She's good. She's a liar, I corrected. Harry leaned forward. So what's the plan? Wait for her to leave and then confront him. I shook my head. No. We're not just catching her. We're catching both of them. I looked around the car. I need 2 of you to stay in the SUV and watch the house. The rest of us? We're gonna wait near the street and see who walks out first. Rob grinned. I like this plan. We killed the engine and killed the lights. And we waited. It took exactly 7 minutes before the front door opened. Lauren stepped out first, bundled up in her winter coat, looking like a perfectly devoted wife rushing home to greet her husband. Behind her, standing in the doorway, was Nick. Smarmy, well-dressed, well-groomed. A little too well-groomed for a guy supposedly just hanging out with an old college friend. I gritted my teeth as I watched him lean down, whisper something into Lauren's ear. She laughed, before giving him a quick kiss on the cheek. Then she hurried toward her car. I could already imagine the story she was preparing in her head. Oh, I was just out shopping. Oh, I didn't hear my phone. The lies were probably stacking up before she even touched the driver's side handle. Too bad for her, this wasn't going to end with a quiet argument in the living room. She got in the car and pulled out of the driveway, heading home to greet a husband who wasn't there. I turned to Rob and Jake. Follow her. Park down the block from my house. I want her to feel safe before I walk in. They nodded and took off. That left me, Walter, Troy, and Nick flucking coats. The bastard turned back inside, clueless to the fact that the storm was about to hit. I didn't rush. I wanted this to sink in. I wanted to walk through that door knowing that he had no idea his life was about to change forever. Walter and Troy flanked me as I walked up the steps. My boots left deep impressions in the snow. I knocked. Nick opened the door. At first, his expression was friendly, casual. Then, his brain caught up. His smile faltered. His posture stiffened. He knew. I smiled. Hey, Nick. Long time no see. He opened his mouth, probably to lie. Maybe to act surprised. But before he could get a single word out, I punched him in the stomach. Hard. He staggered back, gasping, grabbing his ribs as he stumbled into his own goddamn house. We stepped inside and I shut the door behind me. Troy locked it. Nick straightened up, wheezing. David, listen. I hit him again. This time in the jaw. His head snapped back, and he collapsed onto the couch like a sack of shit. I took a deep breath, cracked my knuckles, and looked down at him. Let's talk. Nick groaned, clutching his stomach as he rolled onto his side. His perfectly tailored shirt was wrinkled now, his polished image cracking under the weight of reality. I didn't rush him. Let him feel it. Let him process. Troy leaned against the door, arms crossed. Damn, David. I thought you weren't gonna start a fight. I shrugged. I didn't. I finished one. Walter chuckled. You sure about that? 'Cause I think he still has some fight left in him. I tilted my head. Maybe. Then I reached down, grabbed Nick by his expensive-ass collar, and yanked him up onto the couch. He coughed, rubbing his jaw. Jesus Christ. No. I cut him off. No bullshit. No fake shock. No, it's not what it looks like. We're past that. He swallowed hard, eyes darting between me and the two guys flanking me. He was outnumbered, outmatched, and out of options. Good. I sat down across from him, elbows on my knees. So, how long? Nick hesitated. Bad move. Troy sighed dramatically. Dude. If you're about to lie, just know, David really doesn't have the patience for that right now. Nick exhaled sharply. A few months. I nodded, tapping my fingers against my knee. Define a few. 6. Walter let out a low whistle. Damn. That's not a few. That's half a year. I already knew. I'd felt it in my gut from the moment her texts stopped mentioning him. But hearing it? Seeing it on his face? That was different. I kept my voice even. So tell me, Nick, was she ever gonna leave me? Or was this just a fun little side hobby for you too? Nick hesitated again. Wrong choice. I stood up, grabbed the glass coffee table in front of him, and flipped it over with one hand. Glass shattered across the floor. Nick flinched so hard he nearly fell off the couch. I leaned in, voice dangerously quiet. Answer. The question. He swallowed. I don't know. I stared at him, breathing slow and steady. Then I reached into my coat pocket and pulled out my phone. Okay, I said. Then let's ask her. I hit the dial button on Lauren's number and put the phone on speaker. Nick froze. 3 rings. Then. Hey baby. You almost home? Oh. This bitch. I smiled, even though she couldn't see it. Yeah, I'm almost there. I can't wait. I missed you so much. Nick looked like he was about to pass out. Troy stifled a laugh. I kept my tone casual. Hey, quick question. Where were you tonight? Silence. Then, her voice. Perfectly sweet. Too sweet. Oh, just out with some of the girls. You know, catching up. Why? I glanced at Nick. You sure about that? Another pause. Yeah? Why? I let that silence hang in the air. Let her squirm. Then I sighed. Lauren. I'm sitting in Nick's living room right now. Complete, dead silence. Troy actually had to turn around to hide his grin. Lauren made a small choking sound. Busted. David. No. I cut her off, my voice calm. Too calm. Don't even try. Just answer one thing. I took a step forward, towering over Nick. How long were you gonna keep this up? She inhaled sharply. I could practically hear her brain scrambling for an escape route. Baby, listen, it's not. Click. I hung up. Let her sit with that. Nick looked like he was about to be sick. I turned to Walter. You got his wallet? Walter smirked and pulled it out of his pocket. Oh yeah. Took it off the table when you flipped it. I nodded. Good. Then I pulled every last bill out of it and threw them into the broken glass. Enjoy cleaning that up, Nick. He didn't move. I turned to Troy. Keys. Troy grinned, twirling them around his finger. Right here. Nick finally spoke up, voice shaking. What the hell are you guys doing? I smiled. Oh, don't worry. We're not stealing your car. Then I went to the front door, opened it, and threw his keys into the snow. They vanished into the dark, cold abyss. Nick let out a strangled noise. You motherflucker. I turned back to him, my smile gone. You flucked my wife. His mouth snapped shut. I walked past him, heading for the door. See you around, Nick. And just like that, we were gone. By the time I got home, Lauren was sitting in the living room, looking pale as hell. I didn't say a word. I just walked past her and grabbed a duffel bag from the closet. David, please, she whispered. I can explain. I laughed under my breath. You already did. She started crying. I didn't care. I packed exactly what I needed. Then I turned to face her, my voice calm, steady, absolute. We're done, Lauren. She sobbed harder. Please, can we just talk? I picked up my bag and walked to the door. No. Then I left. Divorce was easy. Lauren didn't get a damn thing thanks to the ironclad prenup. But Nick? Oh, Nick got it worse. See, I had friends. Friends in real estate, finance, and a few who worked for the state licensing board. Nick built his entire career on his name. Reputation was everything. So, I destroyed it. It took 1 year. 1 year of calling in favors, nudging the right people, leaking the right whispers. By the time I was done, Nick lost his biggest clients. His business crumbled. And the best part? I didn't even have to touch him again. Because Lauren did. See, once his money dried up, so did her love. She left him just like she left me. Last I heard, Nick moved out of state. Some backwater town, working some low-level sales job. Me? I was free. And I was never looking back. But I wasn't heartbroken. I was reborn.